So go ahead and unmute her. And basically what we want to do is we want to go ahead and have her walk from this general area over here. So what we'll do is we'll grab our hips, and also you'll notice right now that we really can't see our effectors. And typically I'll come over here and I'll actually select my effectors from this dummy rig, this mannequin as it were, and just go about it that way. I kind of like to see my character in you know, its full glory without the effectors kind of sort of getting in the way. But if you like to see the effectors, you can go ahead and hit X-ray mode, and you'll be able to kind of sort of see the effectors through the character. This can get a little bit troublesome when you're getting close in on the character, as the X-ray mode kind of sort of just makes everything overlay, and it can get kind of confusing what you're picking when you're getting in real close, which is the reason why I use the model mode on a pretty regular basis. But you know, just pick your poison. Alright, so what we can do is, if we turn on this little eye here, this is going to allow us to be able to see our ghosts. Okay, you have to be in X-ray mode. Alright, so we have to be in X-ray mode to see our ghosts. So now that we can see them, this little green line here represents a vector of the motion of your motion clip. So what direction the motion clip is going, and the general destination of the motion clip. Alright, so when you select a motion clip here in your story window, what happens is you select the ghost for that motion clip. So what you can do now is you can actually pick up the motion clip and change the vector of direction, where it starts, where it ends, basically. So yeah, we'll have it start over here, you know, and we'll have her make kind of sort of an arc towards the weapon here. All right, so let's see how that plays out. So let's see. We have our T pose. I'm going to go ahead and remove that just to get an idea of how the walking animation is by itself. Alright. Cool. So here's what it kind of sort of looks like by itself. So one, she doesn't really walk long enough to get to the weapon. So that's easy to fix here in Motion Builder. We have the ability in Motion Builder to go ahead and just loop our tracks. By extending the track longer than its actual duration, we get a loop. And with this loop, we can go ahead and just keep her walking. And we can reach our object. Alright. The only problem with this, of course, is that this walk cycle isn't a perfect actual loop. So what we need to do is actually create a looping walk cycle, and that's pretty easy to do. We can use Story to kind of sort of do that pretty nicely as well. We'll worry about the T-pose later, but let's go ahead and move these all to 0. And the first pose in the walk cycle is a T-pose. So we go ahead and move these back one step. Just one frame. Then on frame 0 we can start with her in her actual walk cycle, which is awesome. Alright. Now with her in her actual walk cycle, and of course making sure that her hands are nicely T-posed, what we can do is we go ahead and start trying to loop this walk cycle. So what we need to do is basically pick a frame where she's in mid-motion and where we have an effector or an FK control that is in a relatively stable position. So if we pick this pose here and we pick this foot down, this can be our first stable pose. So what we can go ahead and do is we can actually trim the whole animation down so that she starts on that frame with that frozen motion there. All right, and then all we have to do is just just find an identical frame at the end that matches that cycle, and then we can create a loop that way. So let's go over here and using our playhead here on story, we're going to go ahead and just remember that frame and find the next part of the walk cycle where she plants her foot and she's crossing. This looks like that frame, so go ahead and trim down to here. And now we have a perfectly looped walk cycle. Kinda, sorta, but not really. We need to do one more thing, and this is where we can use another subtrack to our advantage. So what we can do is we pretty much have almost the perfect frame. Obviously this frame isn't exactly like the first frame, since this is a organic, actual acted out walking cycle. So what we can do is we can go ahead and actually get the pose for this first frame here. So come into our pose controls and we can go ahead and add a pose, and that's going to give us a pose that matches the pose that she has here. Then all we have to do is just turn on our keyframes for our sub track here, or better yet, we'll actually use another sub track because we're going to need to do a little bit of blending. So we're going to create one more sub track here. Insert a override subtrack, and we're going to give it a key, and we're going to go over to this last frame here, and we're basically going to paste this pose into this subtrack. So let's go ahead and do that. Hit this button here to paste it, and now we have a override layer that has the exact same pose as the first frame pose. So because this pose almost exactly matched, there shouldn't be too much of a jump in the walk cycle. It should perfectly blend really nicely. What we can actually do also down here as a final step to make sure everything just looks pretty is we can extend out this track by one frame, and then we can hit this, we can click this top little icon here where this little 26 is, and we can basically move it. And when you move that little top thing, what you're doing is you're creating a crossfade, a sort of blend between these tracks here, this override track, and these tracks that are on top with this track down here. So basically we've created an animation now where if we were to go ahead and zoom out and actually go ahead and play this through a little bit, we would find that the walk cycle pretty much ends perfectly on the same frame. So now we have a looping walk cycle. So this is very useful for video games, and it's very useful for film as well, where we need to have a infinitely moving walk cycle. That's just perfect, you know, that we can loop. So let's go ahead and actually dump all these tracks down. What I'm going to do is actually get rid of this subtrack here because I don't want the head motion added to this dump down yet. I do want the T-pose stuff though, so I do want my hands to be perfect. So I'm gonna go ahead and add that in, let that stay. But just get rid of that head key, and we're gonna go ahead and right click, and then we're gonna go ahead and do a frame start to end. And what this will do is it'll give us a timeline in Motion Builder that matches the same timeline that we have in Story. So we have an equivalent scrub up here as we do in Story. So this way, the take that we actually create here will be perfectly in sync with this take here. So, all right, and then all we gotta do is just go ahead and process track and subtracks to new clip. All right, and so this is gonna process all our tracks into one clip. So let's go ahead and hit OK, and it's gonna ask us to save this track somewhere. And this could actually be useful because you could actually create a looping walk cycle FBX file here, and then you would have, you know, just a perfect walking loop cycle that you could use in future projects and never have to do this again. So anyway, we're gonna go to local render jobs, and we're going to go to tested 2, and we're gonna go to our FBX, and we'll call this walk loop raw. So this is just a raw walk loop. Not too clean yet. You know, the head is obviously not where we want it to be, and different things like that. But for the most part, this is a looping walk cycle that we can use to build upon. So click Save, and there we go. Now we have a perfect walk cycle. So we can actually delete all these other tracks. And now we're just left with our perfectly looping walk cycle, which we can then extend out as long as we want, and we can be sure that she's not going to have any jumping frames in her animation. Well, I say that, but then of course she does have a little bit of a jump there. It's slight. It's something that we could fix, perhaps by doing just doing a slight bit of cleanup, maybe removing like 1 frame or so. We can clean this in Motion Builder too, outside of Story mode as well. Just remove some keyframes, or we could do this in a number of different ways. Clean it up in various different ways, but ultimately I don't think it's going to look too bad. Let's go ahead and hit play and actually see what it looks like in real time. You see what happened there, how it stopped at 28 frames? That's because we set it frame start to end, and frame start to end at one time was only 28 frames, but now we've got 54 frames. So what we can do is right click again and do a frame start to end, and now our timeline will match our story. So now if we hit loop, turn on our looping and hit play, if I hadn't have pointed it out, it might not have been too noticeable. I can see it sometimes, but you know, it's not really all that bad. Alright, so we're good there. Alright, so what we can do now is cut up our track so that we can actually make her come in an arc and pick up the sword. So this is pretty simple. What we can do is we can go ahead and reveal our ghosts so we can see, and basically what we want to do is just over time we just want to cut this track up so she kind of sort of moves. So like right about here, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to hit our razor, this tool here, select the video track obviously that we want to cut, and we can hit our razor tool, and then we can use our rotate and translate tools to go ahead and just translate the ghost, translate the track a little bit. So you guys can kind of sort of see where this is going to go. We're going to keep moving, and then we're going to go ahead and raise her again, and with this new track we're just going to go ahead and move it a little bit more, and to create a nice effect, what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and gradually slice this up, and gradually have her ghosts. And as you can see, we've got a bunch of clips now, so we're starting to see multiple ghosts here and multiple different colorations on the ghost track as we're slowly moving her to where we want her to be. So we hit the razor one more time, and we kind of got her going in the right direction here. And then we can just pick a nice spot to stop. So right about here would be a good frame. I think maybe even about see, how close is she? I'm actually going to go ahead and move that ghost a little bit this way. And I'm going to go ahead and maybe end it like about here. And so there we go. We got our walk cycle now. Let's frame this up, frame start to end. And let's play this back and see how we're looking as far as her walk cycle goes. Alrighty. So that's looking pretty smooth. We've got a nice little arc going on. See, I think this one could be a little less sharp, which of course means this one needs to be translated. And then rotated. And in turn, this one needs to be translated. And this is the reason why I typically try to get these right as we go. But it looks like she's going to be pretty good. Alright. So that looks great. Alright, so the only other thing we need to do now is just work on her head motion. So we can come in now and go ahead and create a subtrack. And with an additive subtrack, what we can do is we can keep all the motions on the bass track, so you know she's still going to walk forward, the neck bone and the head bones and all that stuff is still going to follow. We're just going to add just a little bit of extra motion on top, you know, while still allowing our bottom track to do most of the work. So alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add a keyframe, or allow ourselves to be able to add a keyframe. And on the first frame, we're going to go ahead and select the head effector, and we're going to go into its local rotations. I found that with FK effectors, like the head, even though this is even though these big red things are actually effectors. So typically these big red ones in Motion Builder allow translation. They're typically FK effectors, or FK effectors. But typically the head is treated as an FK control, so typically you rotate it to animate it. That being the case, I find that FK works better when you're in local mode, whereas I found in general FK seems to work really nicely when you're in global. So F5 and F6 are keyboard shortcuts for that. You're going to be switching between those pretty regularly. I would probably remember those keyboard shortcuts. Yeah, basically from the top, we basically want her to kind of sort of be pointing her head. You know, she's walking with a purpose. She's walking to pick up that sword and slice through the air. So, you know, we want her to kind of sort of look like she's, you know, like that's her focus point. You know, in that walk cycle, it's just she's purposefully looking forward with her shoulders raised, and she doesn't really look like she's really going towards that item there. So, and then we'll come in and about in the middle here, we'll use what I call the divide and conquer method, where, you know, we'll go, you know, halfway through the animation. Yeah, so about here actually, and we'll go ahead and move the head again and change its general trajectory there. You know, and this way we get a nice interpolation between the first frame and the middle frame. And if we didn't really have to do anything advanced, and if Motion Builder pretty much did a really good job, which it looks like it did, this is pretty simple motion, then, you know, we only really need 3 keyframes. So at the end here, we can come back and we'll go ahead and do our final keyframe here, where she's going to be looking down to try to pick up this weapon. So there we go. So now we've got like a really good motion. She's consistently looking at that weapon, and she's, you know, trying to get ready to pick it up. And then we'll just slice this down a little bit so that, you know, actually I guess having that extra frame on the end was actually a good idea. So go ahead and right click and frame start to end, and let's go ahead and play this back and see how this looks. And it's looking pretty good. Alright guys, so now that we have the basic walk cycle down, that's about as much as we can do with motion capture. We could go in and try to pick one of our standing motion capture files and try to jerry rig that in and try to get, you know, a clean, smooth transition between her walk to just a idle standing. But since she's going to be, you know, grabbing the weapon from her walk cycle, let's use our video reference and some of Motion Builder's keyframe tools to kind of sort of get that to happen. So we'll do that next.